All right,
We're
welcome
ready.
everybody. Sorry we're a little bit late on starting this. We had a little bit of issues getting people on with the Zoom. Just do a quick recap. As we started, there's a little bit of housekeeping. As a ad hoc committee, we can only have 7 members per the bylaws, and we had 8. So Layla has agreed to step away from the transition committee meetings, and then she will be participating in the other ad hocs. And then obviously, every commissioner can participate once we bring it up to the full commission. So we're now back to the correct number per the bylaws of 7.
For the training committee, training.
Well, for any ad hocs.
I know, but you said transition. We're the training committee.
Thank you. Yes, I've been so used to doing the transition meetings for the last, year and a half. Thank you for correcting me on that. Yeah, that's a good one. The other thing is, Darlene and I had some emails going back and forth. She did have some questions about the budget that we have available to possibly be able to hire some experts and contractors to help give us some advice. Let me share my screen real quick. So what I was starting to say is Charmaine is taking vacation this week. So I haven't been able to get those numbers, but this is the commission's fiscal year 2023 budget. And so this contracts and services item here, last year it was just shy of $500,000. This year it's going to be just a little bit above $800,000. I know it sounds like that's a lot of money, but there's actually, and I'll confirm with Charmaine and let you guys know, but if I remember correctly, 200,000 of that has been given to us by City Council to help us get through that backlog. So that's to help, have, Dwayne or whoever else we hire as a contract investigator to help us get through those cases that have languished. So really, at best, it's going to be, I would say, best case scenario, we might have 400,000 to work with. I do believe, and again, this has been a while, but I believe there was also about $150,000 or so that was earmarked for if we need to hire someone, for example, like a use of force expert. Say, for example, we see a case that comes in and the department has their use of force expert chime in, and we, for whatever reason, don't agree with that, or we think that something, we might need another opinion. We want to have a bucket of funds available that we could then hire those outside contractors to do that. The problem with that, and again, when Charmaine's here, she can help explain if I get this wrong, because I know she has presented this to City Council more than I have. The City Council initially was asking, well, what if we zero that out, and then if you need it, you can come back and ask. And we didn't want to do that because obviously we don't know a lot of what we don't know. So for example, if we had a year where we had 0 officer involved shootings, that's great, but we don't want to budget for 0 what if in a year we have 3 or 4 and we have concerns, we want to send that out to an outside use of force expert. We didn't want to have to then go through the whole process of trying to get supplemental funds from the city, and then delay that process of doing those investigations. So I want to say, I think it's $150,000 is earmarked for those types of things. So I will work with Charmaine to get those numbers, and then at one of our next meetings, we can actually talk about that. So at least we know how much of a slush fund we have to be able to try to source some outside experts to help us do any kind of training we want on, like I said, if it's use of force is probably what I think is probably going to be the bigger issues that we'll see. But we might also have things like, search and seizure, and like we talked about on Saturday, detentions and pretext stops and things like that. Do we have any questions on that?
Is the budget something that we can have a copy of? Because the only thing I could find by searching online was the old one.
Did you get the copy that I just showed you? Because that's online. It's on the city website.
No.
I can send you that link.
No.
Yeah, I'll send you that link. It's available publicly to everyone. I don't believe there's a like line item like for this one where it says like contracts and services. I don't think there's anything that breaks it down to say, here's how much goes to Dwayne, our outside counsel. Here's how much goes to, a potential, the outside contractor they're probably going to hire to get through that backlog. I don't believe we have that listed out. I'm sure Charmaine has that somewhere. I don't have that, but I know when we made that presentation to the city to get the budget approved, they asked all those questions. So, I know we have it somewhere. I just would need to get that information before I can, get you guys that. But I'll work with Charmaine once she's back from vacation, so we can look at that information. Yasmin, I think you also said you wanted to touch base on something. You had pulled some training stuff together. Did you want to go over that now? Or
Yeah, I can wait until the end once you all finalize the pending items from last meeting.
Okay. The other thing
I just probably need about 10 minutes.
okay. Got it. We have, so I'll maybe take like another 20 minutes. We'll do the last 10 minutes with you. The other item we have is Bonnie did send a recommendation or an introduction to Julia Yu, which is one of the people that was mentioned in the Sanders for Justice letter. And let me pull that up. I'll share that. Okay, can everybody see that? All right, so I sent this out to all of the committee members as well. So back in early September, Andrea sent this out to the commission, who then they forwarded to all the commissioners. Some of this I think is kind of, as time has gone on, I think is probably not, we've already addressed a lot of the issues, but I think we can move forward on some of them. So, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to chime in. I think we're a small enough group. If you want to, yes, I can zoom in. Move this. If we want to just, rather than raise your hands, if you can just chime in, I mean, that works too. All right, is that better? Can people see that easier? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
So I think this first kind of a big chunk of take control, I think we've kind of already talked about that. I know her concern initially was, I think she felt that Charmaine, Doug, and I, as former commissioners from the previous CPP, that we were kind of deciding everything on your behalf. I think we've tried to make it clear that, we wanted to kind of do the first steps just so we had an outline, but obviously all of the commissioners can chime in and change whatever we want, which is kind of what we're trying to do now. So I kind of feel like this section has been addressed, but if anyone wants to chime in on that, please feel free.
I'd like to chime in with.
Oh, go ahead.
I'd like to chime in with a positive note. I think you guys have done really well of being unbiased on this. I mean, I had the same feeling, is that we've got people that have been involved with this over the last year and a half, and what was it? I mean, you guys hung in there. Good for you. But it's like they're going to lead us to whatever their agenda is, and we're all sitting here trying to learn this. Well, yeah. In the meetings that we've had in the in-between, I'm substantially less skeptical. I mean, there's always going to be that little skepticism that's going to be there. Count on it. But at the same time, I've got to, give you the applause and the other veteran members of the committee that you guys really are trying to be as unbiased as possible. And for what that's worth, Yasmin, your staff also is doing the same thing. I mean, I'm getting the feeling that you're here to help. You and your crew, they're absolutely here to help. And again, healthy skepticism, but that feels good. It's not like we're going to be fighting all through this.
Yeah.
Or just a little, or whatever kind of fights, I mean.
And I think obviously, we have a big commission of 25 people when it's fully seated. So, I mean, we're going to have disagreements as we go on, and that I think is fine. I think that's representative of the community. But, I can't speak for Doug, obviously, but I mean, I think we have always tried to get at least the base set up so we didn't have to start from scratch, but also knowing that you guys, I mean, me too, because we're all equal commissioners, but that we could at least have some say in how we decide to move things forward. So, I mean, I think we've really tried, and I know, to your point, I know there's some concern, and I don't want to say conspiracy theory, but I know some people worry like, oh, you guys are just trying to keep it exactly the same as it is. Obviously there's only 2 of us, so we would get outvoted if that was the case. But, we were trying to make sure everyone has a say. But no, thank you. I appreciate those compliments. Darlene, I think I heard your voice too, or is it somebody else?
No, I was just going to say that we don't necessarily have to go over the whole letter. I was wanting us just to focus on the training section. But if everybody else feels like it's helpful to go over the whole letter, please, by all means, go right ahead.
I mean, like I said, I think a lot of these things have probably already been addressed, but I want to make sure people have the opportunity to chime in if they want to say anything. I think to your point, kind of this section here, the retaining and consulting experts. I think first we have to find out how much budget we have to work with, which I will work with Charmaine on. And I did send out, the email to the committee members. I know there's a little bit of a concern that obviously, Charmaine, Doug, and I, as legacy members, that we're biasing things, but I think we're trying to be as open and transparent as possible. And I in my email, I was kind of saying, like, let's just not go to outside people just for the sake of going out to outside people. I think let's still use the resources and the expertise we have. So I put in the email, but for members of the public that might be on here, Charmaine, Doug, and I mean, we all are certified by NACOL as certified practitioners of oversight, which is a process to kind of go through. But some of the experts they have here, I mean, I don't know all of them, but I mean, the last part of this paragraph, Paul Parker with CLRB, he's actually worked with us a lot. Back when, I guess about a year or two ago, we started doing meetings between the CPP and CLRB, so we could kind of discuss what's working, what's not working, on the city side, on the county side. So I would anticipate we'd continue to have those types of meetings and, that healthy dialogue with Paul and his staff. In fact, when we've done some tours, we've invited, as chair, I was setting up, a tour of the medical examiner's office for commissioners. And then we also invited the CLRB team to come along. So we do try to share a lot as we can. I'm not personally familiar with Sharon Fairley, but I mean, we can definitely look at that. In the past, we were looking at the carotid restraint. We did have a professor from, I believe it was the University of Kentucky. We flew him out so he could talk about the use of the carotid restraint. So we have brought people out. Obviously, there's an expense to that. You have to deal with, if you're flying people out, you have to deal with like airfares and hotels and things like that. So we just need to factor in the budget. For the bylaws piece, I mean, Dwayne, as you guys obviously have seen, I mean, he's been very vocal about, what we could or should do and how we might want to change things. For the training section, Patrick was, he was a commissioner. I think he might have been still a board member before it was, commissioner, but he's been on probably for like 4 or 5 years. I believe he's certified, a CPO, NACOL certified person as well. I'm not sure exactly what maybe Andrea would like to see him contribute that maybe Charmaine, Doug, or I may not be able to do, but open to hear any suggestions on that. Jason, we've actually worked with him a lot. He's done a lot with us when it came to doing our investigations. So I would imagine we could continue to work with him as well. I don't have any personal experience with any of those 4 other people, but I mean, we can always entertain having people come in to talk about whatever we'd like to see. Before we go forward on that, any questions, concerns, thoughts?
I guess my question when I was looking over this letter and then looking at the information that we have gotten from staff, Charmaine, whoever put this training or the interim commission put this training together is, what do we need to know? And what is a good unbiased source for getting that information? And that is unclear to me. And I'm not sure if, Patrick Anderson is someone who can provide that background, and the list of other training experts that Andrea provided, where is a good place to fit in? Because one area I was thinking about is, we're learning about use of force and all of these topics from San Diego PD in a lot of respects, which is important, I think, to understand where their heads are at. But then maybe there is other perspectives that are used in law enforcement elsewhere, or I don't know what I don't know is what I'm saying.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, and we talked a little bit about this last meeting, is I do think in order for us to do our oversight role well, is we at least need to understand how is SDPD training their officers and what are their policies and procedures. Because ultimately, even if we don't like something, if an officer's following policy and procedure, they're not going to get disciplined for something. So because they're doing their job per SDPD. Now, that's one of the powers that we do have as a commission, is if we don't like the policy or procedure, we can make recommendations to change it. And it's over the years in general, PD has probably implemented a good majority of our recommendations. I think in the last 2 to 3, that percentage has dropped a bit, but because of how we look at complaints and what we see, oftentimes we see when the policy isn't matching up with what I think as a community we would expect it to. And so I think that's why we oftentimes do our policy recommendations, is because, you know, as a member of, you know, a community member board, we tend to look at it from an outside law enforcement perspective. And I think that's really the whole point of Measure B and why we exist and why we do what we do. So, yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know. I mean, there's a couple different ways we could go about it. I guess I would think first, we probably need to have the SDPD training side. And then after that, we can go in and have kind of some complementary training, you know, from different perspectives. And I know when we talked about possibly like use of force, you know, maybe what we do is we have the PD come in and they give us how we currently do our training, you know, on how use of force can be applied. And then maybe we get, you know, someone from like, I don't know, the ACLU or criminal defense attorneys or something like that, that can also provide, you know, another perspective as well. But I kind of feel like maybe what would be easiest is if we do the department side first, and then we hear from the commission where we feel there might be some deficiencies, and then we can figure out how to try to supplement that. Does that?
I don't like that. I don't like that idea.
Why?
I think, because I think we need to have a more well-rounded perspective on these topics. So like we just get the PD's perspective, and then what, 6 months from now, we get another perspective on it, and my head's not even in that space anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I think it would be great to have maybe panels with both perspectives shared, maybe in the same sitting. Ideally, if that can't happen, you know, 1 week, one perspective, next week, next perspective, or something like that. I think we need an outline, and that's what I kind of tried to create with that document that I shared, so that we can see, you know, what the plan is, where we're going, so we understand, yes, we have a plan to share both sides, if like logistically it can't happen in the same panel or whatever. But just like saying, oh, let's just get the PD's perspective first and then we'll get to the other, that just seems very willy-nilly to me.
I think I get that. I think also part of my thought on that is, you know, from our last meeting in our closed session, you know, I noticed several commissioners brought up points saying, hey, I'm going to abstain from voting because I'm unsure of what the policy is. So I think you know, let me step back a second. I think part of it is, you know, we've had a lot of commissioners make comments like, we need to start getting these cases reviewed again. So when someone does file a complaint, that they actually feel like those complaints are moving through the process, you know, as quickly as possible. But also I'm a little concerned that if we break every single chunk down into such a small piece and we have all these different viewpoints, we're going to slow down that whole process of getting the training done. And I think we probably, you know, there's probably what, 5 to 10, you know, chunks of the department policy and procedure that I think are probably the most important for what we need to see. And I would hate to push that out so far that, you know, we have more people not voting on things because they're unsure what policies and procedures are. But I mean, I get your point and I totally understand it, but I mean, I think it might be more interesting. Like use of force, I think is something that we're probably going to absolutely want to have, you know, a complementary point of view from the police department. But I think maybe when it's something like, you know, the handcuffing procedure, maybe that's less important than, you know, detentions or search and seizures or things like that. But yeah, I mean, I want to hear everyone's perspectives and so we can figure out how to move forward on that. If there's any other perspectives.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, this is Dwayne. Why wouldn't we, I mean, we wouldn't know who's biased or unbiased until we hear them. But my thing is if we need to hear from PD, but couldn't we have an ask of PD? Couldn't we develop questions that we would give PD so that when they come and talk to us, they'll be able to answer our concerns at that meeting? Like, I would want to know if they were going to be talking about, you know, their stops. And we know about pretextual stops. I want to see some data. So, I mean, I think police, if they're going to be promoting something, I want to see data on that. So we need to ask them, and they need to bring that data instead of just telling us the things. I want to see data that supports whatever they're saying. There may be data that we could even research and bring forward that really doesn't support it. So, I mean, we can ask questions prior to the meeting. We can develop those questions and give them to the police so that when they come to us, they have answers or they're
Yeah.
ready to answer our questions.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good, and I'm sure they'd be willing to do that. I mean, we could poll the commission to see what concerns and thoughts they have. And then, yeah, I mean, the one thing on the data, I totally agree with you, but I think you can make data say almost whatever you want it to say. It's my, yeah. It's my only concern, because I know, like, when we were talking about use of force and we had them come in, even by the department's own data, they basically shared, like, yeah, 50% of the time, you know, the carotid restraint doesn't work. So it's like, you know, I think it's good to get that data, but I think you can also skew that data. And I think as long as we have access to kind of validate it, I have no problem with that. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Lupe, I see your hands up.
Yeah, does this include a de-escalation protocol?
Yeah.
Supposedly, that they have one, like a grid or something? Because I remember seeing it very vaguely, but that must have been one that was outdated.
Yeah, I mean, my personal opinion on de-escalation. I think it's very well intentioned, that policy. I don't see it as being very effective currently, because we've seen cases in the past where an officer will swear at somebody and they'll argue that's a de-escalation tactic, which the commission in the past, we completely agreed with, or disagreed with rather. I mean, it was one of those things that, you know, yes, there are times an officer can swear at somebody, but there's also times where it's inappropriate and it ratchets the situation up. So the department in the past has argued, like, if there's a stop and someone's not putting their hands up and you have an officer that yells, like, you know, put your effing hands up, the department considers that to be okay. And that doesn't violate their courtesy or their de-escalation policy. Now, we'll see, I'm sure, in the future, and we saw, you know, in the closed session, there are times where things are said that you're like, that doesn't help the situation. So I think that would be a good thing for us to do. We can get the department's perspective on de-escalation and how that's used, and then maybe, you know, some outside perspectives as well. I mean, I would love to see that policy with more teeth personally, so it actually is more enforceable than it is. But just because we make that recommendation doesn't mean that the department will actually follow it and implement it. Dennis, go ahead.
You know, one of the things that I'm frustrated with in their training is that the way that the training is set up and the way that it's reported back within the police department, whatever division it is set up so that I want to say I do the bare minimum to check off the boxes that my training makes me do now. And I report it back to my supervisor, and my supervisor looks at it and goes, oh, okay, good job. And the reality of the situation is that the captain, I don't know about the levels below it, but the captains that we've talked to have no idea of what's going on the street. And I just keep thinking about that initial report from the officer on the street is set up in such a way that he can check it all off and make it all look good and everything. And then it moves up and it moves up and it moves up. And lo and behold, you've got the captain sitting there going, my department's just doing wonderful. Look at all the stuff they're doing. And you want your data? Here's the data. It says we're doing really good. And yet you go and you talk to the people receiving services, I guess is a good way to put it. And, oh, they're scared to death. And what's happening to them is unconscionable. So as we're questioning what their training is, I think it's another area that we should look into. Might be a little bit more difficult to look into, is to how are you reporting what it is that you're doing? Because I suspect that's highly biased.
Yeah, and I think that kind of is a good segue. I mean, one of the other things is as we start to look at cases and you actually read, you know, officer reports, arrest record reports, all that kind of stuff. I sometimes, and not every officer does this, of course, but, you know, sometimes in the complaints we get, I call it creative writing, because the way that they will write it, I mean, they'll say, I escorted the subject to the ground. this sounds lovely, that someone got thrown to the ground. I mean, that's not, you weren't escorted, you were thrown to the ground. So, I mean, I think when we start to review those reports, there are certain things, and you guys will, I'm sure, all start to pick up on and catch on it. The way an officer will sometimes write things, you learn to read between the lines, and then once you watch the BWC, you get a more clear picture of what's going on. And I think that kind of goes back to what you're saying is, you know, just because it's written one way doesn't mean that's actually the full story of what happened.
We have I guess, a pretty broad net that we can cast out for professionals. And I would like to recommend that we think about bringing in somebody that is, an instructional designer, like from the college or something, that can look at what the officers are being trained as, what the reports are looking at, and the language. That's where they're really good at that. They look at the language on it that, like you said, escorted to the ground. No, that's okay. That is a word for it, but that's not going to fly. And they can shape all of that. So, I mean, it's a direction that we really haven't looked at. And there are people that are, they're so extremely good at pulling together that kind of a curriculum and making sure that it's taught right. It would be very interesting if we could have somebody come in that was educated in that and say, look, this is not the way you do it. You say it like this, because the language that they're using to get out of trouble, the language that they're using to put the people in trouble, is a big part of kind of everything that's going on at the street level.
Yeah. I took a note of that, and we'll look into that one. Lupe.
Yeah, I'd also like to see about their PERT policy or their training that the officers have to go through with the psychiatric emergency response team.
Ooh.
I had heard that they get training anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks or shorter than that. And since, to my knowledge, the shootings that have happened, well, currently or in the past, they've involved with individuals with, were severe mental health illness or disability. And, when the officers arrive at the scene, there's no PERT team, and I know they're short, staff. That's what they've always told me in the past. So I'd like to see what their policy is now currently about the PERT team, and how do officers get, more training other than just a few weeks, or anyway, that's.
Yeah, I mean, that's a complicated question. So we actually do have, and I know that we haven't done it yet because we're trying to get the base taken care of, but all commissioners usually will have access. They call them menu courses that the department does. And that can be everything from, spotting people that are under the influence of, drugs or alcohol. Obviously I was working, so I couldn't do the 3-day PERT training, but I did the 1-day training, and it was really interesting. But I think for me, what was also interesting is not just seeing how they train that, but also hearing the other officers that were in the room with me, how they responded to some of that, which I thought was really good. I mean, obviously, if we all had the time to do the 3-day one, I would absolutely recommend it. It's a lot of a time commitment for volunteers,
but those are available to us.
Yeah.
I would like
A list.
Yeah.
I'd love
So
that.
I think what we're trying to do is, and I did it like 4 years ago. It's been a long time. We basically have a list of not all of the courses that the officers do, we have access to, but I would say it's like 95% of them we have access to. A lot of them are like kind of during the, Monday to Friday during the work days, but there's some pretty good ones, and it helps us kind of, when we see complaints, it helps us kind of understand how things are going on. PERT, I think, is absolutely a great one for us. But they also, I believe, officers, if they have that little PERT lapel pin, I believe those are the ones that have, I think it's a 5-day training, I think, but it's short. It's not.
That's it.
I think if you're an actual PERT clinician, that's a whole different story.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, and I know the county was trying to add more funds to have more PERT clinicians. But to your point, there's not enough. And so it's, I think it's only usually they're trying to get to have at least one PERT clinician for every shift, for every division. And I don't know if they ever got there. I know that was one of the goals, but I think that's a good thing for training. We can actually have them come in and teach us about that and what they're currently doing and what they'd like to see.
Sounds
Mhm.
good.
So I'll put that down there as well. I think I
I'll give
saw
you time.
another hand come up. And if not, I know Yasmin wanted 10 minutes and we're right around there. So I wanted to get her some time. But I don't see anyone raising. I thought I saw a hand pop up, but if anyone has any questions or thoughts, feel free to email me and I can always add that to our agenda for the next time we have a meeting and we can bring that up. I will try to look at the PERT stuff because I think that might be a really good one because I think that's pretty topical. But I'll loop back with everyone and we can figure out how to move forward. Yasmin, go ahead and you can take the last now 7 minutes because I was a little too verbose.
No worries. And I will say this is a draft and it's a work in progress. So ignore the numbers here, but this is kind of one of the things I've been working on since the beginning of maybe May or even April. And I worked on this through conversations with community members, and I'll go through one by one. Community organizations, leaders, etc., to hear from them what are some of the trainings that they want to see. And also some of it is from, for example, like this, where is it, the end part. I'll go through it. Some of it is also a response to the requirements the ordinance actually requires the commission to go through. So I just wanted to share what I put together with you all, and you can take from it what you like and remove what you don't like. But doing a training on implicit bias, anti-racism, etc., I identified an organization called Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative. They're based in LA. The co-founder and executive director, her name is Marguerite Hill. And Charmaine and I met with her and spoke about designing a specific training that is for what they need. And this, the actual description of this is the training that they have on their website. But the training that we talked about is specifically focused on the Commission on Police Practices and making sure that we're given opportunity to commissioners to learn about implicit bias, to learn about identifying bias, how to work through it from a non-shameful lens. So really going through case studies of how does bias show up in different ways, how can we identify it individually and as a group and name that bias is happening, and how can we work through it to make sure that we are reviewing cases, we are reviewing complaints in a non-biased way. Whether that's, for example, like if one of us has a bias against an unhoused community member, if one of us has a bias against police officers, etc. How do we take the bias out and look at the facts of the actual case and review that case and investigate it in the future once we actually start being able to investigate in a non-biased way. So both Charmaine and I met with the executive director, Marguerite Hill, and really loved her approach. It's very learning based, very focused on making sure everyone is comfortable and meeting every commissioner where they're at, instead of trying to start from a step where people are not on the same level. Because we know as a commission, everyone comes from different experiences and backgrounds. So making sure that we're addressing everyone's experiences as well as bringing everyone where they're at is very important. So that's a little bit about what this training is. It would be a full day. And we're still working through the actual description, which I can provide once I get the final version. And I'll share this. The racial profiling in San Diego, this is actually on our Saturday agenda. So this is already something that's being done. And it's going to be presented by the Coalition for Police Accountability and Transparency, CPAT, by the ACLU of San Diego ACLU. The staff is Brandon, who's an organizer here in San Diego. Currently, they're San Diego Senior Policy Advocate. And you all will get to hear more about this training. CPAT focuses on addressing pretext stops and specifically looks at the reports done in San Diego City. For example, Campaign Zero report, as well as other reports who were presented to San Diego City Council and other and reports done by the police department as well. So they take a very they take a collective approach to their training, but they'll be able to share more about that this Saturday. There's a training by the National Conflict Resolution Center that focuses on culture, communication, conflict training. And this is a 4-part training that is 8 hours in total, 2-hour sessions. And my recommended presenters would be Simon Nassim and Mika Glass-Blake. Both are community members who have done a lot of work and have a lot of experience with impacted community members. And the training basically focuses on communication, how to be better bystanders, how to avoid, how to work through conflict, etc. However, and it's free. However, this training specifically doesn't go through, for example, case by case, or doesn't allow you all to be able to dig deep on how can we address this specific issue that came up in our meeting, for example. So my recommendation is after we do this training by the National Conflict Resolution Center, we pair that up with a de-escalation conflict resolution focus training that will be given by Maureen. And this training will actually focus on looking at examples and case studies happening within our context as a Commission on Police Practices, and will also be paired with coaching from the 2 trainings through a small group setting with the commissioners that will answer all your questions and walk you through the process one by one, as well as allow you to actually do scenarios and dig deeper into the scenarios, because we know de-escalation and conflict resolution is not something we become experts in from a one training or a 1-hour conversation. It's an ongoing thing that we would need to be trained on. And I'm suggesting conflict resolution or de-escalation trainings because in our meetings in the future, we may have community members who are coming and they're frustrated because unfortunately they have complained several times and have not seen results, etc. We may have police officers in that same room, and we want to make sure that we're creating a space for everyone to be safe and comfortable and be able to express their frustration and their concern in a safe way. And I think one thing that is important is we all as commissioners and staff are comfortable with de-escalating issues. That way we don't have to resort to calling in outside forces to de-escalate the situation. If we're trained enough, we are able to minimize additional interactions. So that's kind of a little bit about this training. The youth adult partnership training, because this commission is specifically has youth seats on it. This is the first time in history this commission has youth seats on it. A lot of the staff are young people as well, including myself. I'm recommending that we do a training on how youth adult partnerships could be better and could be improved. And I'm recommending the Global Action Research Center, Global ARC, and Paul Watson specifically as a trainer who has extensive years of training specifically in youth adult partnerships and how to do that effectively. He has over 40 years of experience doing this type of work. And then this is one of the things that community members brought up over and over again, and it was even included when the transitional committee was putting together the training. They mentioned this as well, which is a community tour bus. Oh, sorry, no, I'm talking about the next one, but the community tour bus is actually something the commission did in the past, and I've heard several community members say it would be nice to bring it back. And this is focused on making sure that the commission gets an opportunity to meet with community organizations who work with impacted community members throughout the city of San Diego. So in the past, what they've done, and this is based on the past, not like what the suggestion would be to do in the future. This is how it was done in the past. They specifically worked with the Islamic Center of San Diego, so Muslim population, the LGBTQ Center to address LGBTQ young, folks, Chicano Park, and pillars of the community. And this would need a whole day. So it's on a Saturday, would need a whole day to do. And I'm recommending Tasha Williamson. She is the person who, one of the key folks that organized these in the past, and make sure that the commission had access to them. And then rebuilding community government relationships. This is a training that several community members have named, which is inviting Tasha Williamson to give a training on her experience and addressing key issues that highlight why community members have mistrust with city governments, government agencies, including law enforcement and police oversight commissions. As we move forward in this new commission, it's very important that a part of what we're doing is building community trust. We're bringing the community in, we're being transparent and talking about what are the issues at the forefront that are preventing this trust and the relationship to be built is important, because it will allow us to shed a light on these issues and start tackling them. And also Tasha has a lot of extensive experience as a third-party complainant, and filing complaints in general. So this training would also address what is that process look like for community members who do this and file complaints and go through the process that we have created, etc. And then community ride-alongs. This is what I was referring to that was included, that community have talked about for a very long time. And this would be an opportunity for the commissioners, if we're doing ride-alongs with police officers, that allow us to show how the police functions and operates in the community. The community mentioned several times that it's important to see the other perspective as well, which is how our community cop watchers, what are they going through as they do cop watch in San Diego? How are their interactions with police officers and police agencies in the city of San Diego, etc. So that's a quick, and then again, these are not developed yet, but community panel focus on the experience of impacted community members with law enforcement in San Diego. And then the last one is a panel of professionals, including mental health advocates, civil rights attorneys, criminal justice attorneys. And again, these are things that community members have named. I have some suggestions here that Kate, who's on the call, some came from her, some came from others, etc. But this is kind of what I put together so far. I'll share this with you all, and I'm happy to continue developing however is helpful to everyone. And I can take questions if you all want to stay on. You're muted.
I was drinking water earlier and I went over hearing gulps. I did a community sit-along, ride-along with Layla about 2 years ago, and it was interesting. I mean, of course, they always kind of call it the ride-along curse, that when you're there, nothing happens. So, I mean, there was actually not a lot that happened, but she and I actually had a really good conversation. She shared a lot of what she sees in the community, and some of the frustrations, and she was also able to, ask me a lot of questions about what I saw when we were looking at complaints. So I would definitely recommend, if commissioners are interested, to do that. I mean, I think I was there for 3 or 4 hours, but it was a very worthy 4 hours of I think it was like a Friday, I think is when I did it. Well, I think if anyone wants to chime in, feel free, but I was going to say, I think that looks like a pretty good list. I think once we can try to get some of that stuff scheduled out, I want to make sure we're not overloading commissioners though with too much stuff, because they know, people still want to have their weekends, and I just want to make sure we're at least balancing out people's personal time with what we're trying to do with training for the commission. But I mean, these are all really important topics. So yeah, great work on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I do have 2 thoughts is how we communicate. I mean, I know the training is put in the agenda for our meetings. That's always included as an attachment. But I'm wondering, is that enough? Because I think the optic, since we got the letter from San Diegans for Justice. I do think it's really important that we can communicate the things that we are doing to respond to these concerns. And then the other point, and kind of why I created that table in Word or whatever of what the trainings are, is I think it's, you guys are, the staff is probably already thinking this, but to have a program, a training program, because we're going to have new commissioners, right? Hopefully before June 30th, we're going to have new commissioners, and then have something that we've already kind of fleshed out that we can make sure they get, and have a sense of the order of when each of these pieces needs to happen.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is obviously there's a lot going on, but I mean, to your point, now that we have, a set of new commissioners, and we already have 4 vacancies. So obviously the city council president has said they were going to start this fall, but I haven't heard, Yasmin, I don't know if you have, I haven't heard if they've actually started that recruitment thing for those replacement 4 commissioners, but once they start, they're going to have to do training too. So, I mean, it's having that framework set up and kind of in place will make it a lot easier for everyone going forward. But I think part of it is with the letter, when I say we, royal we, the commission, has already reached out to Andrea. I think my opinion, there were some factually incorrect things in there, and I know we have tried to touch base with her on that. But also, one of the things that we're going to do at the next open meeting is the chair has asked that all of us, so I'll report out for us as the training. They've asked us to kind of give a quick update of what's going on and what we're trying to do. So I think that kind of goes to a little bit of what you're talking about of reporting back, so the community knows that these issues were raised or concerns were raised. Here's what we've talked about. Here's how we're addressing that. That we'll be moving forward on those. And of course, that's an open forum, so people can ask questions and they can do public comment on that as well.
If I can chime in really quickly, I also I would love to design something to include in our newsletter, specifically about like the training committee. I actually already asked Brandon for like a summary. If you want to edit the summary to reflect this meeting too, you can. But I can also design something for social media that says, here's an update from like the training committee, here's what's the bylaws committee, etc. So really, whatever you all want, like that is something that you can tap into me specifically when it comes to the newsletter and social media. I can support with getting the word out there.
And I actually would open this up to everyone here on this committee. I think what I would probably prefer is I would like us to formulate whatever we want to change or what we want to make changes to on the training schedules, and then have that go to the full commission before we announce it out to the public. I would rather have us say, as a training committee, here is our recommendation, and then having the full commission then vote and say, yep, we agree, or no, let's make some changes before we tell the community, here's what we've done. Because I don't want to get that confusing. I would rather have the full commission, bless it essentially before we promote it. Would that be my preference? But I mean, if anyone disagrees, please let me know. I see a thumbs up, so I'm going to guess we're good on that one. So I know we're a bit over time, and I know people are probably ready for dinner. So I have a couple items I've made notes on here for follow-up. And I think we're still going to try to do consistent Mondays. Let me know if anyone that doesn't work. Sorry for last week. I don't know why. I completely forgot I was on a plane and I would obviously not be able to be on the meeting. So I apologize for that scheduling mess up, but otherwise I think we'll be good for next Monday as well. And I will try to send out an agenda again, so we can actually hopefully have something to work from. If there's nothing else, I think we can adjourn. All right, I'm not seeing any hands. Oh, Dwayne, did you have something?
No, I'm saying I'm good.
Okay. All right. Have a great night, guys. Appreciate your time today.
All right.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.